Hey guys, this is Jagan signing here from Tech Tutor. In this video podcast, basically we are going to be discussing how to use Docker in DevOps, right? And my assumption is that you already have some basic idea about Docker and how it is different from VMware or other stuffs, right? Okay, so I'm just going to be focusing on a demo here, right? Okay, my Ubuntu machine is running, and then I have set up a Docker server and Docker client. As you know, Docker is a client server based technology. I have set up Docker, and I'm using my basically the Mac terminal to connect to my Ubuntu machine. That's it. That's my way of working. So I prefer that because I get this white background and things like that. That's it. Okay. So here, if you look at this particular tab, what I have done is I have already stopped my Docker server using a command that if you want, sudo service docker stop. So in case your Docker server is already running, you may want to stop it using that command, right? Once you have ensured that the Docker server is stopped, we need to enable we need to launch the Docker server by enabling the remote API, because Docker server comes with the remote API facility. With the remote API facility, what one would be able to achieve is basically Jenkins will be able to communicate with your Docker server in case it requires one Docker container, right? That's how we are going to use Docker in DevOps. Okay, so I have already started or launched my Docker daemon, which is a server with this kind of configuration. So now my remote API is enabled, and then like basically this particular Docker server is listening at this port 4243, which is a typical default port. Okay, so this is done. Now once this is done, then maybe like you can start your Jenkins, right? So you can start your Jenkins server, and I'm using a standalone WAR file. In fact, that doesn't really matter. It's if you prefer installing Jenkins and then launching Jenkins, that's also fair enough, right? So basically, what you need to understand is basically, I'm going to set up some kind of Jenkins master slave setup, right? So the Jenkins slave machine is going to be a Docker container, right? And this particular Ubuntu box is going to act as a Jenkins master, right? Because I have already set up Jenkins. So this Jenkins is going to act as a Jenkins master, but whereas the Docker container which we are about to set up is going to be basically the Jenkins slave machine. So in case of DevOps, right, provisioning a system is also automated. In case if you take continuous integration, your Jenkins CI server is going to continuously poll, or like periodically it's going to poll your version control to see if there are any changes, code changes, right? So whenever the code changes happens, Jenkins is going to grab those changes, and then like it's going to trigger a build with whatever build tools you have configured the job with, right? So that is exactly going to that is exactly the procedure we are going to follow here as well. But one difference is, in case of continuous integration, someone would have already set up the build machine with the necessary OS and with the necessary tools that are required to build your project, right? So, but in case of DevOps, provisioning of the system or the setting up the machine is also automated, right? So at this point, we have no Jenkins slave machine, or we have no build machine setup already, right? Upfront, we have not done that, but we are going to configure Jenkins in such a way that it makes use of the Docker server to provision a new system whenever it sends us a change in a particular project, right? That's the process we are going to follow here. Okay, so over here I have already created a simple project. So in fact, this is a hello world project that you can create either manually, or you can use the archetype plugin to set up this. In fact, this procedure, though it is for Java centric, but the same approach you can follow for C, C++ or any technology. It doesn't really matter, but I have to pick up something. So I thought like, I've started with some Java based project, but otherwise the same idea, you can extend this for other technologies as well, right? Because DevOps or continuous integration is basically language agnostic. Okay, fine. So let's focus on what is this Docker file, right? So the Docker file is a script which is used by Docker to provision a system. So I have created this particular Docker image I would like to create based on the base image called Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an official a base image that you can get from hub.docker.com. So your hub.docker.com is kind of a central repository similar to your Maven central repository, right? So this can be we're going to base, or we are going to create our custom image using the Ubuntu official image as the base image. Okay, so maintainer is a switch where you can document your who created this and so on, right? So their contact details and things like that. Okay, so run command, typically all the commands that you see from maintainer, all this, right? So highlighted in orange color, right? So they are Docker commands, right? So when I say run, this particular apt get update will be basically executed to create the image, right? So it's going to while the machine whenever your Jenkins master senses a change in version control, it is going to request the Docker to provision a system. At that time, basically your Docker is going to provision the system based on these commands, right? So we are basically updating the necessary PPA repositories and things like that. And if you understand basically the Jenkins server or the Jenkins slave machine typically expects, or it requires some kind of open SSH server, because the Jenkins master will be communicating with the Jenkins slave machine via SSH. So what is required is basically your Jenkins slave machine should have a SSH server. Only then the master Jenkins will be able to communicate with that, right? So that's why we are installing OpenSSH server on the container, right? That is a Jenkins slave machine, and these are some configurations that you have to do so that your SSH server runs properly, and then it accepts the SSH connections and things like that. That's it. Okay, over here I'm creating a user called Jenkins on the Jenkins slave container machine, and then I'm changing adding this user Jenkins with sudo permissions and things like that. And over here the Jenkins user password, I'm changing it to Jenkins. Okay, so both the name of the user as well as the password is Jenkins. Okay, and I'm also creating some directories called .m2. This happens to be your Maven local repository, and I'm also changing the permissions of the .m2 so that this guy, the Jenkins user, becomes the owner of that folder. And similarly, I'm creating certain other folders. So these are basically, this particular thing is a kind of workaround I have to do, because when I set up a Jenkins job, this is, if suppose assume that this is going to be your Jenkins job, what this Jenkins job will try to do is it would try to create such a workspace directory inside that build machine. When it attempts, if it is not going to find this folder, or it is not able to create this folder, it's going to give up the build, right? So I don't want that. So I have created a directory based on the name of Jenkins job that I have created. So you can create or you can customize this Docker file as per your needs, right? So I have done this, and ideally this is not required. This is just a workaround to resolve that problem. Okay, but this one I need, right? So basically the Docker container is also going to go along with the code, right? So I have created this empty folder. In fact, all these folders are going to be empty, right? So this is the empty folder that I've created, and then I'm going to I've made this Jenkins user as the owner, and this is a Java folder that I've created, and which is also empty, and then it's the Jenkins user becomes the owner, and similarly the Maven folder, and then Maven folder, I mean this Jenkins user becomes the owner of that folder, so that he has read and write permissions and things like that. Okay, and I'm installing Maven. I just want to show you one example at least how to install software. So basically I'm installing Maven, but Java and other stuffs, Java and especially this code will be mounted as volume, right? So instead of copying, there is also a command called copy. Instead of copying the your Java setup, or instead of copying the source code, what I prefer is basically mounting the host machine directory as a volume inside the container, because that is going to make your Docker image smaller, right? So the footprint of the Docker image will be small in size. That is the advantage you get when you use volumes as opposed to copying or installing. Okay, of course, when you install this, it's going to increase the image size. In fact, if instead of this, if you have probably mounted a volume, it would definitely bring down the image size. But I just want to show at least one command, one scenario where you can install software. So basically this particular Docker file pretty much explains every at least the basic scenarios, that a couple of volume mounting and then one installation, right? And if you remember, we have set up this SSH server, right? So the SSH server default port is 22. So I'm exposing this port 22 so that the Jenkins master will be able to talk to our Jenkins slave machine set up as a Docker container. Okay, and once all this is booted, so basically this cmd command, right? So the cmd command, basically what this does is it starts here. You can give one command, one application. You can start one of the application as your startup application, right? So I'm starting the SSH server, right, the daemon. Okay, that's all it is done. Okay, so you can build, actually you can build this image using this command called docker build dot. Basically when you say docker build dot, and from the current directory it's going to take the Docker file, and then it's going to build a Docker image, and it's recommended to give a tag name, right? So that we can easily identify the image, right? So I'm going to say techtutor hyphen the forward slash, and you can give any name, right? So maybe you can say test Docker image or whatever it is, right? So I'm going to say DevOps slave, right? So since I have already created one, and then like my Docker is smart enough that our Docker is smart enough, so it has sensed that all these layers already present in my system, so it is really fast. But if you are doing this for the first time, any missing layers, it will download from the hub.docker.com, so it may take some time, but in my case it's already ready. And if I issue this command docker images, I can list out all the the Docker images that are available in my system. So this is the Docker image that we are going to be using. So and if you look at this was created 20 hours before. So though we issued one more time, it has not really created one, because there is no difference between the Docker file which I used to create this image and the one that I issued now. So since there is no difference between the difference in the Docker file, Docker has really skipped creating this new image. Only when there is some changes in the Docker file, it's going to create another version of Docker image. Okay, so this is the image that we are going to use for our Jenkins slave setup. Okay, done. So the infrastructure as a code is nothing but this, right? So this one. So this is the script, Dockerfile script, right? So this goes as the infrastructure as code, because now all the provisioning setup steps are described in this Docker file, right? So there is no need for someone going and then setting up a machine, installing OS and installing all the necessary softwares. All this is completely automated now, right? So as part of the code, right, as part of your project code, even the Docker file is added, right? So in fact, I have already added this the entire project in Git. In fact, the same can be pulled from online if you are interested in trying out this, right? So Okay, so this is where you can actually find the entire code, right? So in GitHub it's available, and this is the Docker file that I have uploaded. And in fact, you can also make use of, you can pull the image from hub.docker.image. So the same one, whatever I showed you, this is exactly the same image, right? So and you can access the Docker file from here. Okay, fine. So let's go ahead, and okay, so this is one. So let's move on with the Jenkins, right? So I have connected, this is my Ubuntu machine. I'm going to connect to the Jenkins that is running on my Ubuntu. Okay, so let me log in. Okay, I've logged in. Over here I'm going to create, okay, I'm going to create a freestyle project, right? I would say maybe I'll call it as December build image, Docker build Docker image. Maybe I'll just give the name of the month so that I can differentiate. Okay, so build a Docker image December, this one, and then it's a freestyle project, right? So once this is done, yeah, of course, let's remove this. Once this is done, we can directly go and configure this. Build triggers, I'm going to say poll SCM, and I'm going to set up every 2 minutes once, right? So the polling is done. Every 2 minutes once, basically Jenkins is going to poll the version control. And okay, of course, I've not given the version control itself, right? So in the source code management section, we're going to give this particular path, because this is where I've done a git init, right? So the git repo is, this is my git repo. So I'm going to give this as a git repo, and I'm going to give the credentials of the machine so that it can talk to that, Jenkins can talk to the version control that is running on that machine. Okay, this is done, and it's going to poll every 2 minutes. Okay, and if there is any change in the Docker file, then it's going to trigger this build. Okay, so rest all is fine. So okay, of course, the build step we need to add, right? So I'm going to say execute shell. So here the command that I would like to run is docker build dot -t DevOps, or like I would say tech tutor DevOps slave, right? That's all. So you can do an apply, you can save. Now let's try if this Jenkins job configuration is correct. Looks like it is correct, right? Let's see if it is really built. Yeah, it has built image, right? So whenever it senses any change, so now it's all good. Now definitely this is going to trigger a build. Okay, let's create one more job, right? So here this one is going to trigger the project compilation, right? So the building the project itself, right? So I'm going to say build hello, or the DevOps build, I will say DevOps build, again I will say December 2016. So this is the one which is going to actually compile the project. Done. Sorry. Okay, so let's say okay, it's a freestyle project as usual. Okay, so yeah, this is created. Now okay, so we're going to okay, I'm going to do this. Let's come back to this, but what I'm going to do is basically we want this project to be triggered based on our previous project. Okay, so here we're going to say build after other projects are built, this option. So I'm going to say build Docker image, this one. So once the Docker image is built, then this project will be uh, the build trigger will happen. That's it, right? Okay, so this is done. And over here, I'm going to give restrict where this project can be run, right? So over here, I'm going to say Docker slave. Of course, I'll show you the configuration that you must do to get this option. In fact, this Docker slave is a slave which our Docker server is going to provision on the fly, right? This is automatically created. It's not a machine set up by me or someone, right? So it is a Docker machine or Docker container which our Docker server is going to create on the fly. Okay, I'll show you the configuration. Okay, this is done. Now here we're going to add again execute shell so that we can switch to the directory and then create the build, right? So assuming that the machine is up and ready, right? So if you still remember the Docker file, right? Let me open the Docker file. So over here, this is the folder. This is the folder. I'm going to be copying or mounting the source code from my host machine into the Docker container. So I'm going to assume that the code will be available here, not this one, right? See, let's do a cd and then let's copy this one, exactly this one, right? Okay, I don't know what happened. I did some mess up. Okay, so let me copy this. Okay. Okay, I've undone. Okay, so yes, it's copied, right? So I have basically changed the directory to the project folder, and I would like to do a mvn clean test maybe, right? So because the container is also going to have the code, right? So we don't have to get it from version control, all that. In fact, we are going to mount, right? So once the Jenkins master sends us a code change, the Jenkins master is going to take a snapshot of the code, latest code from version control, right? So in fact, the image itself, the Docker image itself is created from the Docker file that came as part of the workspace. So which means the Docker file is the latest one. Along with it, it also has the necessary code. So that is the code we are going to mount it as a volume inside the container. So essentially you are always going to get the latest code as part of your image. So you don't have to worry about again grabbing that from version control, all those circuits. It's not really required. See, that is the idea of DevOps, right? So this is done. In fact, you may have to do some export. So for instance, you may have to do some you have to help with some home directories and things like that. Otherwise, your container is not going to find these Java and Maven, things like that. So basically, we will say this is going to be the Java home, right? So we'll set up this, okay, and we'll also say Maven home. I'll say Maven home. Okay, Maven home is going to be user /user share Maven. Okay, this is done, and let's also do the path. We'll also export the path. So now I'm going to say Java $Java home /bin : then $Maven home bin : then we'll also ensure the existing path is also appended. Okay, so we have appended these three plus yeah, I think that's it, right? So this is enough. Let's do apply. We'll save this. Okay, now let me show the configuration that I have already done, right? So if you go to configure systems, manage Jenkins and configure systems, so you will have to first install a plugin called yet another Docker plugin. I have already installed the yet another Docker plugin. So if you install this plugin, you will get this cloud option, and you can give any any name here, right? So this is the name that appeared over there, right? So I have given DevOps slave, in fact not that, so this one, right? So this label is what we are using there. Fine. Okay, so you can give any name for your cloud, and then since my Docker server is running at this local host at port 4243, I have given that. In fact, you can also your Docker server may run on a different server other than local host. In that case, you just replace this local host with the IP address and the credentials of the host machine where the Docker server is running. Okay, so this is all, this is fine. So if you want, you can just do a test to see if our Jenkins yet another plugin is able to communicate with the Docker server. Yes, it is able to communicate, and it has negotiated and agreed on some common API version and things like that. So the handshaking is done, and this is where you configure your Docker template, right? So this Docker template is more about the container itself, right? So this is just the above configuration. This is more pertaining to the communication of yet another plugin with the Docker server. But what follows below in the Docker template, this describes your requirement about the container, right? So the container machine itself. Okay, the maximum number of instances, let's leave it as 10, right? That is the default one. So 10 instances it can create maximum. That's what it is, right? So here, based on what Docker image this yet another plugin is supposed to provision a system, because the Docker plugin, yet another plugin will not really know what kind of software requirement you need for your project. So that is why we created a Docker file and we have installed the necessary softwares, all that upfront, right? So using that Docker image, right, using the previous, if you remember the previous job that we created, that is going to create this particular Docker image. So based on that Docker image, we want this plugin to provision a system for us. Okay, so we have done this, and these things I am going to leave intact as it is. And in fact, this section is something you need to understand. So this is home Jenkins is the folder that is present in the this particular machine, right? So because we are creating a user, right? If you remember, we are creating a user called Jenkins. Obviously, this user home folder will be home Jenkins, right? So that is the folder we would like to give, because for the Jenkins user will definitely have read write permission for within his own directory, and this is the name of the Jenkins slave machine, right? I'm going to call it as Docker slave. In fact, this is the name that we have given as the restrict to run this build in some machine. If you remember, that is the machine, right? So this is the name of the configuration that we have given. So yeah, so now the Jenkins master is going to communicate with the Jenkins slave, that is the container machine, using the SSH, right? So because it is a Unix machine, so it's preferred to connect it via SSH, and we provide the credentials of the machine. If you remember, this is the Jenkins and Jenkins. So we have created a Jenkins user, and then if you remember, we have changed the password of the Jenkins user to Jenkins. That is the credential we are giving here, right? So all this is done. If everything goes well, so you can actually go back, and now the project that we created recently was, I guess, this one, right? So DevOps build, we are yet to run a build, so we'll trigger it manually. We'll see what happens. See, if you look at this, as of now it says pending, waiting for next available executor, because for this build to happen it requires a build machine, right? So we have not created a build machine, right? So what it is waiting for, it is waiting for a Docker slave to create one. If you notice, interestingly, it has created a Docker slave machine automatically, right? And as of now, this Docker machine is offline. So in couple of minutes, or like within some time, basically this machine will be up and ready. Once this machine is provisioned, basically Docker, yet another Docker plugin is going to assign this machine for this build purpose, right? So let's see what happens. It is still pending, right? We'll see why. We'll wait for some time. Okay, so it looks like it's not able to communicate, or sometimes maybe it is because it's downloading something, or some provisioning is happening on that, right? So maybe it is installing Maven or something. So we'll see why it is taking time, right? Right. So see, if you look at this, this is automatically created, right? This DevOps machine is automatically created. It is trying to connect. So let me pause this video and then come back once I have some update. Yeah, if you notice now it is installing JDK. So why it is taking time is basically it's because it's downloading all these stuffs, right? Yeah, it's downloading. Ideally, I mean, I don't want this to happen. Let's see. I mean, I don't want this Java setup to happen, but I'll tell you how you can avoid that, right? So now Jenkins is in, Java is downloaded, but it is not able to communicate with the, with the machine with the SSH, right? So that's why it has failed, right? Okay, so let's see what to do to fix this problem. Let me configure. This is fine. So I think we'll have to look into the other configuration, right? So the configure system over here. Yeah, over here, the one that I forgot to show you is this create container settings. Over here, I haven't really mounted any volumes. That is the reason Java is getting installed, right? So I have really a very slow internet connection here. The room I'm sitting has a very weak Wi-Fi signal, so I don't want to install things. Yeah, except the Maven, I don't want to install because Java installation is like pretty huge, 180 or 150 plus MB, right? So I don't want to do that. So I would like to mount some volumes. So the way you mount some volumes is basically you can just give the path of this JDK. So in fact, my JDK is installed on my host machine in this location. The same path is where I want to mount inside the container also. That is why I have created similar folders. So if you notice, I have the first folder. This represents my the host Java path home. This is the Java home on my host machine. The same files I'm mounting inside this within this mount point. That is, I have already created this folder structure to mounting for mounting all the files that are present. So for instance, if I just go to this, right, I have these files, right? So this exact same file structure I would like to copy or mount inside my Docker machine. Okay, that's exactly what I'm trying. Okay, so this is done. Same way, anyway, we are installing as part of the image. The image will automatically install Maven, so we don't have to worry about the Maven part. But Maven also has something called local repository, right? So that's where all the plugins will be downloaded. So that directory, right, in my case is this, right? So this tilde is the home directory and then .m2. This one I would like to mount there, right? So I would say home train.m2 from my host machine. I would like to mount as home, and the username inside the container is Jenkins.m2. Okay, this is also mounted. Fine. Now we need to mount the source code itself, right? So the project source code. This one, right? So this one, let us mount this directory. Copy. This one we would like to mount as inside this folder, correct? Home DevOps. Copy. Okay, so I'm going to mount it here. So we have mounted JDK, we have mounted the .m2 folder, and we have mounted the source code. I think we are good. Okay, all this is done, and I mean, it's comes from localhost, or you can give the IP address. This is fine. That's it. I think like this will take care. Okay, so I will save this, but ideally this should have happened. I mean, it should be able to communicate with this machine. Let's see. Okay, so let me do a apply, save, and let's try building it one more time, right? We'll build it now. Okay, so as usual, it is pending. So it is waiting for the Docker server to provision a system for the build to happen on that machine, right? So until then, the build will be kept on hold, right? So now it has created the Docker container, and you can see the Docker container ID there, right? But as of now, it is offline. Okay, so now it says that waiting for next available executor. So again, the build has failed. Let's see, understand why it has failed. Okay, now this time it talks about, okay, yeah, this is interesting. So this is a different problem, right? So if you remember, I said that as part of a workaround, I have created this directory. So in fact, what is happening is, since I have named the Jenkins job as DevOps build December 2016, so it is attempting, or it is trying to create a directory called this inside the container, but Jenkins is not able to do that. So it's failing. So what I would like to do, I would like to create this folder. Basically, I'll just copy these two lines and I'll paste it here. Okay, so this folder, it's trying to create a folder. I think the name of the folder is DevOps build December 2016. So in fact, we'll do the same thing here. DevOps build December 2016. In fact, we don't need these two folders. Okay, that is done. Okay, so now as part of the image itself, we are creating this folder. Hence, it should help. Now, because we have modified the image, right? Let's modify the Docker file. Let's also trigger this build, right? So for instance, we would like to trigger build Docker image, this one, this image. Okay, so that the new changes are updated. So I mean, from the new updated Docker file, it's going to create this image, right? So hopefully this is done, right? Now let's trigger this manually. Yeah, in fact, since we have already set up this build in such a way that once the build image is done, it is going to trigger this build automatically, right? So that is why you are seeing this even before we clicked, we triggered the build manually, it has been automatically triggered, right? Of course, that is what is DevOps or continuous integration is all about, right? Yeah, so now as usual, the slave machine is ready, that is container is ready, but yeah, something went wrong. Let's see why. The log file. Okay, so why is this time? Okay, so let's do one thing, right? So still it is reporting the same problem that it is not able to create this folder. Okay, let's see if we can mount, if we can run this image and then debug it ourselves, right? So I'll say docker run -it, and the name of the image is this DevOps slave, and I would like to mount these folders, right? So whatever the plugin has done, the data another plugin has done, we need to test it manually, right? So for this sake, I would like to mount this JDK path as the same path inside the container. So now the JDK is taken care, fine. Now what else? We need to mount this folder, right? This project folder, that is this directory. This directory we need to mount. Okay, inside this we'll also do that. Okay, but this folder is not, this path is exactly not the same, right? So we need to get it from the Docker file, ideally Jenkins. In fact, yeah, let me open one more tab. SSH. Okay. Now let's open this Docker file. So in fact, we are looking for this folder, right? So we want to map our code into this folder. Let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to remove this. I'm going to paste the path that we copied. Okay, so this, the current project folder is mapped as hello DevOps inside that. Okay, so the JDK is taken care, and of course we need to do one more thing, that is we need to mount the .m2 folder from my machine, the host machine, into the home Jenkins .m2. Okay, this is also taken care. So JDK is mounted, and .m2 folder is mounted, and the project is mounted. Done. Okay, so after all this, let's connect. Let's do a bash so that we get a terminal. Okay, so this is our new container. Okay, so let's see if we can get into this. Okay, we see this workspace, fine. Let's check if this code is there. Okay, the code is mounted, right? So in fact, this is not really present in this container. It is coming from the host machine. Okay, we have tested this. This part is working, fine. But let's see if the JDK path is present, right? I mean, JDK path will be present, but does it have the files? Yes, it has the files, right? So it is also mounted from our host machine. And let's also check one more thing, that is home Jenkins.m2. Okay, this is also there, right? So the reason for our build failure, let's check why our build failure is happening, right? So it was complaining there is no such folder, right? Let's see if this folder is created. CD. Okay, looks like there is no such folder, right? So that is the problem. Workspace, okay. So there is no such folder. So somehow then it has not picked our latest this one, right? So the reason for that, I can guess, is basically I have not checked in the Docker file, right? I need to do git add, yeah, Dockerfile. I've staged it, and then I'll do a commit. I'll say updated Dockerfile. Basically, we have to add that project file, if you remember, right? So we did this directory, right? So we added this directory. Okay, so this is done. Okay, Now let's see if this automatically triggers a build for this one. So build Docker. Okay, it is, we need to wait, right? So maybe I'll pause this video until it really starts the build. Okay, so if you notice, it has started this build Docker, right? So it has started this. Basically it is trying to build the image fresh, right? Because we have done some changes. In fact, what I understand is it is trying to install Maven, right? It is trying to install Maven. Once this build is over, it is supposed to trigger the DevOps build automatically, right? So it is preparing the image, it is creating the image that will be used to create a Docker container. So that Docker container is required for the next build to happen, right? So that's why it is doing that. So let me pause because it may take a while. Okay, I think the download is still going on. Yeah, almost it's about to get completed, I guess. Yeah, it seems to be over. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so the build image is built, right? The image is built successfully. Now it is supposed to trigger this particular build, right, automatically. Look at this. It has already started, I guess. Okay, let's see if, yeah, this is going on, right? So the build is pending, so it's waiting for the, yeah. So now the build is going on. Look at this now. Since the, Maven is already installed by the new this one, so now the build is complete, right? So look at this, these steps. So for instance, if you remember, we did export Java home, we did export Maven home, and we have set up the paths for so that this particular container can recognize where is JDK, where is Maven, and where is our code, all that, right? So it's all taken care now, right? See, in fact, the fix that we did also seems to work, right? So it is now able to see this folder, so it's happy. So that's why it is, it's able to proceed, right? So the build is able to proceed. Okay, so that's it. So this kind of explains you how you can use Docker in DevOps, right? So I'm going to be uploading this video so in YouTube. So if you like this, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then if you have any comments and questions, you can post a comment. I will get back to you. Otherwise, my mail ID is Jegan, JEGAN at techtutor, tektutor.org, and this is my LinkedIn profile. If you want to get in touch with me, you can always get in touch with me with this. And for any consulting inquiries or training requirements, you can also feel free to reach me. Okay, yeah, hope this was useful. Thank you.